Now you will experience the full power of the Darkseid. I feel like we've done this before. Welcome to 5 Points of Articulation. Today I'm taking a look at the all-new DC Multiverse Classic Darkseid Megafig by McFarlane Toys. Starting with the packaging, and it's been a minute since I've had one of these extra large Megafig boxes on the review bench. We got our name and logo down here. On the spine, Darkseid is being listed as part of DC Classics, which is abundantly obvious thanks to this artwork. If this doesn't hit you in the superpowers feels, nothing will. I do think it's interesting, though, that for copyright purposes they focused on Superman, and while I'm down here, for those looking in-store, here's the UPC. There have been so many times where the artwork that they used really doesn't line up with the version of the character in the box, but here it really is exactly what it says on the tin. For packaging, I'm giving Darkseid 5 points. Moving on to presentation, Darkseid stands at 9 inches, or 23 centimeters. This figure's a mostly new sculpt, except for the upper arms. Those have been reused from Mongol. Mongol, by the way, being bigger than Darkseid. Not gonna lie, that feels kinda wrong, but I will say those shorter arms do help to give him a stocky quality. The texture on those arms is a little bit different from the rest of the body, but it blends together well enough. There's also a little bit of extra paint in there to bring the detail out, which is appreciated. On that note, it's very subtle, but there are some painted highlights on the torso. Darkseid is looking absolutely fabulous in his combination muscle shirt, boy shorts, thigh highs, and half cape. That giant de-emblazoned medallion really brings it together, though I'll be honest, I'm a bit mixed on the cape. McFarlane has done a good job, and we'll talk more about it in Playability, but aside from the fact that it harkens back to the superpowers era, it's not something I really like on this character. And yes, I do know he had the cape in the comics. Admittedly though, that's just a matter of personal preference. I don't know, where do you land on Darkseid having a cape? Sound off in the comments below. One thing I think we can all find common ground on, though, is that this head is really cool. He's got his signature blue bucket, along with some well-painted, gridded teeth, but most importantly, the scary flare of his Omega beams. I love the way they've been inlaid into the head, and honestly, this is probably the head I'm going to be displaying him with. The funny thing is, even though I don't really love the cape, I kind of wish that if they were going to do it, they would have made it a bit longer. Even so, this is still a pretty spot-on representation of a classic comic Darkseid. All that said, and for presentation, I'm giving Darkseid 5 points. If you're enjoying this video so far, do me a favor and give it a like. Moving on to Poseability, and I think we should know better than to expect too much out of a Megafig. Just looking at this design, and obviously up isn't going to happen, but really, who does Darkseid look up to? He can look down a bit, also gets a pretty nice amount of tilt, and side to side. Moving on down, he can raise his arm this high, no real rotation this time. I'll also warn that the arms pop out really easily, no bicep swivel, but he does have swivel hinge elbows. In lieu of the typical wrist balls, he can merely swivel and hinge up or down. Moving to the middle, and all Darkseid has is a ball joint in the waist. He can only arch back this far, and he can only hunch forward this far. Darkseid does get a bit of side to side and twist, just don't expect much. Below the big white belt, and the hips seem to be the same as usual. He can kick this high, which is better than I expected, and even the split's really impressive. There is twist, but this is a pretty bulky leg, so don't expect a whole lot. And that just fell off. Come to think of it, that's actually kind of fortuitous. I was about to say it would have been really cool if they were able to hide a thigh cut under the boot, but peering into the void I can see that wouldn't have worked. The reason I point it out is because he doesn't have ankle balls. As such, all he can do down here is hinge and pivot, so anything that could have given swivel would have been appreciated. On the other hand, actually seeing the engineering does help you understand why they do the things they do. Fortunately, Darkseid has double jointed knees and apocalyptic toticulation. For a character like Darkseid, who mainly just sits around looking scary, or stands around looking scary, articulation might not be the most important thing, and at this point I feel like we're kinda used to the bigger, bulkier character suffering in this area. The bigger issue is how easily he falls apart. Throughout filming this entire video, every limb just keeps coming right off. It's so bad that I actually kind of think he might have been intended as a Build-A-Figure, but then they just decided that was too expensive and made him a Megafig. I was going to give him a 4, but based on his propensity for falling apart, for Poseability, I'm giving Darkseid 2 points. Moving on to Playability, and credit where it's due, Darkseid has a lot more going for him than most Megafigs do in this department. First and and foremost, Darkseid comes with a trading card and a figure stand. If you want to read that, pause here. Next, and let's talk about hands. We've already seen the fist and open hand that he comes pre-packed with. He's also got a matching right-handed fist and a left-handed pointer for when bossing around his minions. Nope, not those. Not only that, but in addition to the Omega Beam head we've been admiring throughout the video, he's also got this standard non-Omega Beam version. Just like the other head, McFarlane's done a great job here. I love the shadowy, deep sad eyes. I will say that the seam is so distinct that I kind of wonder if they couldn't have just done swappable faceplates instead. That could have given us even more Darkseid expressions. Even so, for what it is, I'm happy. And we can't have a conversation about playability without talking about this cape. And not only is it wired, it's wired on the sides and the bottom. This way you can create all sorts of wavy looks. As I've already said, Darkseid with a cape doesn't do much for me outside of my nostalgia for superpowers, but I still have to acknowledge it's been well done. I just wish it was optional. But playability's more than just alternate parts and wired capes, it's also about how well your figure plays with others. Starting with the Man of Steel, and here we have Hush in Action Comics 1000 versions of Superman. But for a couple of other super options, here's DC Classic and Earth 2. And just because I'm sure someone out there is interested in this body, here's Dark Knight Returns. From the Man of Tomorrow to the Cape Crusader, and for a couple of classic blue and gray Batmans, and here we have Nightfall and Earth 2. For a couple of black and gray options, and here we have Rebirth and 3 Jokers. But for one final Batman, and here we have Hush. For the third member of DC's Trinity, and here we have the Collector Edition version of Wonder Woman. But for the rest of the Justice League, and here we have Rebirth and Cyborg Wave versions of the Flash. And then for a couple of Green Lanterns, here's the Silver Age Fidgetal Hal Jordan and the Endless Winter John Stewart. Speaking of Endless Winter, here's the Endless Winter Aquaman with the alternate Barry Allen head, and also the JLA Wave version. For one of Darkseid's fiercest warriors, and here we have Calabac. That said, for a comparison I'm sure a lot of you are curious about, and here's Armored Darkseid from Zack Snyder's Justice League. For the villain most often compared to Darkseid, and here we have the 7-inch scale Marvel Select Thanos, and the 6-inch scale Marvel Legends Deluxe version. On that note, if you wanted to pit this Darkseid against your 6-inch scale DC collection, it looks great. For a relative scale comparison, here's Darkseid with Pizza Spidey and the Spectacular Spider-Man. And lastly, here's old Loose Limbs with Stealth Iron Man. Megafig seldom even come with a single accessory, so 3 alternate parts and a wired cape? Combined with his ability to mix and match with both 7-inch and 6-inch scale figures, this Darkseid is great, but playability does suffer when playing with the figure makes it fall apart. For playability, I'm giving Darkseid 4 points. This leaves us with nothing left to discuss but the price. Retailing at $39.99, Darkseid has more value in box than any DC Multiverse Megafig I've seen. Other than the limited articulation, the only area he struggles in is production quality. For price, I'm giving Darkseid 4 points, averaging out to an apocalyptic total of 4.2 out of 5. For more videos, check out one of these. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, play nice and have fun.